Hey there, nerds. Today we're going to talk about ability scores and the generation thereof. So grab your 4d6 and let's get to rolling. All right, Jim.
Yeah.
Rolling up a character and ability scores.
Yep.
Let's talk about this.
It's the heart of a character, right?
It's the beginning, the nexus, the spark.
Nexus, the nubule of a character.
Right.
What it will spring forth to.
Right. So rolling versus point buy. Give me your thoughts.
Well, I mean, for most of my time playing D&D, it has been roll.
Yep.
Whether that's 46, drop the lowest and range to taste. A couple of times I've done 3d6 in order. That's a fun experiment.
Well, don't come with a preconceived notion of what you want to play.
What you want to play. You've got to see what character the dice give you,
Right.
and then go from there with that kind of game. You know, so for me, rolling is, and the randomness of rolling is part of the fun of making a character. Mm-hmm. However, there are plenty of times when I just don't want to roll dice. I know, or if I'm just making like a character that really just relies on one stat, that I might prefer point buy, because then I can say, all right, well, I know I want this in my, this is the character I want, and I'm gonna get as close as I can arranging these points so that they fit that character concept. You know, my brother's doing that Curse of Strahd game where he wants us to use point buy because he wants to kind of keep the numbers low, and keep a more basic D&D without all the bells and whistles and options, and decided for point buy for that. I'm excited to see how it works out.
Yeah, most definitely. Because, I mean, it was weird. I mean, you know, because I made a character for that the other night.
Yeah.
It was fun. Made a rogue.
Yeah.
And she's going to be awesome.
It's going to be great.
But coming from, like you said, we've mostly done rolling. Mm-hmm. And we even sometimes we do a lot of times where you roll 7 times and drop the lowest.
And drop the lowest.
Like, you roll 4d6, drop the lowest, but you roll a 7 times, drop the lowest. That way it gives you a little bit more chance to have a hero.
A hero. It brings me to one of a funny D&D story for myself. The very first time I played 2nd edition Dungeons & Dragons, or Dungeons & Dragons, period.
Yeah.
I had someone explain to me, here's how you make a character. And I heard, roll 4d6, 7 times, drop the lowest 7 times. And so I rolled 7 sets of stats and picked the highest 6 out of all of those out of all of those stats that I picked. So I was like multiple 18s, couple 16s, and a 17, and showed up with my elven fighter mage. And like, here he is. You said to do this, right? And it was only until, it was when we were playing in the movie theater, in the office, and it was only then that I realized, like, oh wait, if you roll 49 something stats and pick the 6 best, you are going to have an amazing character.
You better.
You better.
Otherwise you need to get new dice.
So I think that you know, there's so many different variations on how you roll, whether it's like I said, 3d6 in order, 3d6 arranged to taste, 4d6 in order. There's a lot of different ways, whether you use 5d4, 3d8. You know,
no, I've thought of different ways like that where you do 3d8 and you could possibly get a 24.
Yeah.
I mean, hey, you just be one of those, a prodigy, and so you're 24 intelligence, right?
Yes.
You know, I've also played with groups that did, when you were rolling, they did 46, drop the lowest, but anything underneath a 10, you automatically ignore.
You automatically ignore, yeah.
Just because.
There's some that do 2d6 plus 6 for your stats.
Yeah.
So that there's a guaranteed floor. You know, at the very least, you're going to have an 8.
Yeah.
You know, that sort of creates a floor that nothing can go below. And so, I mean, I think that when you're talking about rolling, you're going to be committed to having that randomness. That you're going to have characters that are much better than you could get with point buy,
right?
Because you're accepting that randomness. At the same time, the characters that are just too weak to play, and it happens when you're rolling up a character.
Yeah.
Those just don't get selected to go on to the next stage of character creation.
No.
So there's this kind of selection process with rolling where only the very best rolls are going to be made into characters, meaning that rolling kind of has a reputation for being a home of munchkins and power gamers and things like that. That's not been my experience, but it is something that some players out there.
But
that's
again,
the perception.
But again, you're here to play D&D, and you should be a hero.
Right.
And heroes should be badass. At least in my opinion.
Yeah.
If you have a bunch of 10s and 11s and 12s, then maybe you should just go ahead and stay on the farm.
Stay on the farm.
Stay over there and be a mason.
Right.
You're going to be just fine. You're going to live to 40, 45, have a couple of kids, die of old age.
Maybe once or twice you get carted off to fight a goblin, but for the most part, you're just going to do your thing. Yeah. And yeah, you're right that D&D has always been about heroes, whether it was the zero to hero paradigm of earlier editions or the big damn heroes paradigm of sort of later 3rd edition, especially 4th, and to some extent 5th edition.
Yeah.
You know, you're always that at some point in a D&D character's career, they have surpassed mortal limits.
Yes.
They can fall off cliffs and be just fine. Riddled with arrows, no problem.
Right.
Conjure powerful magics, no problem whatsoever. All day long they can do this. And they've passed beyond those mortal barriers, and their stats should somehow reflect that. Whether or not you need those stats at level 1 or you build up to them, matter of play style, and every DM and table is going to be different.
Right. Okay. So you have your stats. You have your array.
Yeah.
Your six. You're putting them into your abilities. Let's talk about abilities.
Yeah.
Okay. So in past editions, abilities didn't mean as much, right?
They're all over the place. So for some of the earlier editions, ability scores really there to give you +1 or 2 boost to some key combat features, or an XP boost if they're above a certain threshold. But for the most part, you can go and play an original D&D character with a 5 in a stat and be perfectly fine.
Yeah.
I played a wizard who had the unfortunate circumstance to have a 5 for charisma, which is the worst stat to have really low in old Dungeons and Dragons, because so much relies on how you can hire henchmen, how loyal they are to you.
Oh, yeah.
And so having a -2 modifier to that was a real hindrance. So I just paid them all double and kind of made up for it.
And roll through fear.
Yes, and gold. Not unlike Mr. Tywin Lannister.
Yeah.
But as the editions grow and as they progress, more and more becomes attached to the ability score. Till you get to 2nd editions, the block with like bin bars, lift gates, percentage of resurrection, system shock, how many spells you could know per level, how many languages. And there's kind of a fun granularity to the 2nd edition approach to abilities, but it's also cumbersome.
Yeah, roll that D100 on that strength, see if you get that 0-0, baby.
See if you get that 0-0. And when
Only seen that like twice.
Yeah. And when it happens, it's fun and exciting and awesome. And even if the next fighter over only has a 17 and they're not as strong, they're not getting the +3, +6. That granularity adds depth to a character. But in 1st and 2nd edition, not as much was tied to the ability scores, right? Like proficiencies a bit, or non-weapon proficiencies. The ability scores are really just they define your character, but your class is more definitive.
Right.
Whereas from 3rd edition onward, the ability scores become really tied in with skills and saves, and become more central to your character after 3rd edition.
Yeah, dexterity starts to become the god stat.
It really does, and particularly in 5th edition, where dexterity can be used for attack and defense and initiative and one of the better saves in the game. And there's so many things that's tied around it. It's hard not to gravitate towards dex-based characters.
Always try to have a 12 or a 14 if possible.
At least, yeah.
Unless it's like your main stat.
Yeah, and so I think that goes with 5th edition, where everything has been flattened somewhat, and the difficulty classes and save DCs are down. At the same time, the game doesn't assume that you're going to say start with an 18 in your main stat.
No,
you can start with a 14 or 16, a +2 or +3, and be perfectly fine. Build it up over the course of your adventuring career.
Yeah.
And I think that, bring it back around to point buy, that's what's good about point buy, is you can pick exactly, this is what I want. I want my character to be good at this, and I don't want to leave it up to random chance.
Right.
I want to build this very specific character. Here's how I'm going to lay it out, and then you build up from that base.
Yeah.
And you can have a perfectly powerful character starting at 1st level with point buy.
Most definitely.
Skilled in combat, or competent in the areas that they need to be. You don't have to have random rolls just to have a really powerful character.
Right.
Although it is less powerful than you could potentially get.
Right. So whenever you are setting your stats, say you did point buy, would you be more apt to give yourself, go ahead and have an 8, so you can have a couple of stats at higher?
Yeah.
Or would you rather have a little bit better floor? You don't want any negatives.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like what how do you like to array your stats?
Gotcha. So I don't mind having a negative stat modifier in something, particularly if I feel it fits the character concept, or if it's a type of class that really only requires 1 stat. So a wizard is a good example of this, because they really just kind of need intelligence, some con, and then the rest of that is going to come through their spells, everything else. So if you want to give them a negative modifier to charisma, they're just a cantankerous, antisocial wizard. They can do that. Or a negative modifier to their strength and just hope that no one ever tries to grapple them.
Well, they haven't been summoning the right shit if something actually grapples them.
Yes, their own summoned creature needs to be grappling their own enemies.
Yeah.
So I don't mind having an 8. But if I'm dealing with a character that I want to be more well-rounded or that has a lot of attributes that need to be maintained, like say a paladin or a bard, where there's multiple stats that need to be kept up, I might not opt for a negative modifier there and might accept more mid-level stats, more 12s, more 13s, more 14s, as opposed to higher level 15s and 16s, just because I want a more even base to build that multi-dimensional character from.
Right.
And not have so much glaring strengths and weaknesses to it.
Right. Yeah. You wanna boost all those skills.
You want to boost all those skills that you even just a -1, you don't want that dragging down on you.
Right.
Maybe not everything has a plus to it, but you very least can avoid the penalty.
So once again, thanks for watching WebDM. Go ahead and subscribe. Let us know in the comments. Head on over to Facebook. Like us over there. Tell your friends about us. Come on back next time. We can't wait to see you. Have a good one.